Hey folks, Tim Newman here at Lite Studios, and it's another Tuesday. And as you may or may not be aware, Tuesday is Composition Day here at Lite Studios, where every Tuesday we try to put together a video that addresses some topic related to composition, either in the field, in camera, or in post-production efforts. So, I got really excited about today's topic. So excited that I skipped the whole shaving part, hopped down to the studio and started recording this right away. And here's the thought that I want to share with you. The notion of how do you know how far you can expand an image when it's time to print it? At what size is that image going to fail to still look good? And it turns out there's some rather simple techniques for understanding this that a lot of photographers that are using Lightroom and Photoshop are missing. Take a look at this. In order for us to work through this notion of what is the potential maximum print size for an image, I think we have to agree upon a couple of starting points here in our conversation. Starting point number one, and this is a rather simple point, but I do think it's important, is I believe that we have to use the same image working through this exercise. It gives us really valid viewing comparisons from size to size to size. And this is the image right here. As you can see, looking down here at the status bar right above the film strip, this is in fact a raw file out of a Canon camera. And if we look over here in the metadata, we will see that this file is 6,720 pixels by 4,480 pixels for an effective aspect ratio of 3:2. You can see that it has not been cropped, so we're looking at it at its full size as it was captured in the camera, and it was captured on a Canon 5D Mark IV, which we know sits right around 34 megapixels as its maximum potential image size. So there's the image we're going to work with. We're going to dive into this image a little further in some screens coming up here, but that's our starting point there. Our second starting point is, I believe that we all have to agree that potential maximum print size is a very subjective position. And the subjectivity comes into what's acceptable to the viewer. And there are a lot of varying ranges there for viewers. You know, one person may say, well, I think that's sharp enough. And another person may say, oh, I like that soft look that it has. In addition to that, sharpness in an image is also a derivative of the material that it's printed on. I have images that I have printed in rather large sizes on cotton rag papers or highly textured canvases, and they look perfectly fine. And I print that exact same image on an exhibition fiber or on a really glossy polycontrast paper, and the image is no longer acceptable. The sharpness, if you will, of the surface of the media that you're printing to has an impact on that. And last but not least, so I'm throwing in a third point here, but I'm the one with the microphone, so I could drop in points where I want to. At any rate, the third point here is viewing distance is an important consideration. While we may be 1 foot away from the screen looking at our image in Photoshop and evaluating the pixels, if we're making a 16 by 20 or a 24 by 36 or even a 40 by 60 image, we're probably not that close to that image hanging on the wall, and distance is a great arbiter of pixel sharpness. Okay, so we're going to start there. So here's our image. Now, what I have done is I have used Lightroom's export module to export this image as a TIFF, and in that export module, we have the ability, and I'll show it to you right here, to specify for this file that we're exporting a percentage reduction, and we can say that we would like this to only be 10% of the original image size, or 50% of the original image size, or 75% of the original image size. I think you get the point here very quickly. So let me cancel out of this real quick. We did exactly that. And if I come over here to a Finder window that I have open, you can see that in fact I have exported this image a number of times, and at each one of these exports I have changed the resolution or the percentage by 10%. So we started off at 100% size. Image A up there is 100% full size, and image B is 90% of the original size, down to 80%, so on and so forth. So we get down to this really small image down here at 10% of its original size. And I'm going to move this window over just a little bit. You can see the corresponding file sizes, which don't necessarily relate to what I would have expected for a raw file, but what I know is I made edits in Lightroom. Those edits in Lightroom are getting layered on top of that TIFF file coming out, and that is what's contributing to our increased size. Now, if you look over here in the inspector panel to the right of this directory listing, you can see the dimension size of each of these images. So as we work our way down through each of these images, you see that the horizontal and vertical dimensions are continually scaling down based on the percentage request that we asked for. That certainly makes sense. That's exactly what we would have expected to see. One of the things that I want to point out as we're going through and looking at this list is that the resolution, the pixels per inch that we specified, is 300 pixels per inch all the way across the spectrum here. Every single image is at that 300 pixel per inch resolution, which is exactly the resolution I would set at export for anything that I intended to print. So to make this a little easier to view, we've put together a quick little spreadsheet here. The quick little spreadsheet has each of the image names listed here along with their percentage. Of course, that static PPI that we specified for every image, the number of horizontal pixels and the number of vertical pixels for each image, and the approximate megapixels of each of those images. Now that math is a little fuzzy here. We're not using the exact formula for calculating megapixels, but we are pretty darn close to the ballpark we're looking at here. So we're starting off with roughly a 30 megapixel image going down to 24 megapixels, down to 19 megapixels, and so on and so forth, down here to the very end when we have an image that's essentially a third of a megapixel, pretty tiny in terms of the number of horizontal and vertical pixels in it. Pretty similar to about the resolution, or maybe even the one above that you would see for stuff that you intended to be used for web content, except we probably wouldn't put them out at this number of pixels per inch, and we would undoubtedly bring them out as JPEG files as compared to TIFFs. But I think you can see across the board here with this one image, we have a pretty fair comparison of all of the potential sizes that we could be working with here. All right, with that starting knowledge in hand, I am on the Mac going to Command Tab over to Photoshop. For you Windows users, that would be a Control Tab. And you can see that I have this image open in Photoshop. In fact, if you look up here at the tab bar, which contains all the tab documents in this interface, you can see that I have this image open a number of times. And in fact, if I click on this double arrow to the right of the tab bar here, you can see that I have all of the images open at the varying percentages that I created them at. So I'm just going to step through here. This is one at 100%. This is one at 90%, 80, 70, 60, 50, 40, 30, 10, and last but 20, last but not least 10%. See any noticeable difference there? Me either, and here's why we're not seeing a difference. Photoshop, when it displays a document, displays that document with this percentage value over here. And what a lot of people mistakenly think is that this percentage value is the percentage of the size that the image will be displayed at. And they're thinking, oh, well, this is 21%. Obviously, a huge difference between 21% and 100%. So at 100%, this thing would look amazing, right? Well, not necessarily, and the 21% isn't a viewing magnification percentage. It is a pixel percentage, which means for this image here, we are only viewing 21% of all of the pixels that are in the image. And if I work my way all the way to the opposite side here, you can see that I am viewing this image at 210%. Or in this case, what Photoshop has done is actually added pixels to the image. It's used its bicubic interpolation process to create pixels here on the screen that aren't even really in the image in order to supply it to us at this fully zoomed viewing ratio. Okay, so keep that in mind. Those percentages are a little bit misleading in that they make you think that it's the percentage that you can view the image at, and it's really a percentage of pixels being displayed out of the total available in the image. So at first blush, viewing these images in Photoshop isn't necessarily very helpful, because as we're working our way across here, there's our 5th image, our 6th image, 7th, 8th, all the way over here to the 9th image. We are looking at a representation that is at least close to 100% of the pixels in the image, or progressively working down to less and less of the pixels in the image as the file sizes get larger and larger. So that is not a valid comparison. Here's where the comparison becomes valid, and that's when you start turning rulers on. So I'm going to go to this tab here, and I'm going to turn the rulers on. That's a Command R for you Mac users, a Control R for you Windows users. And you can see up here, looking at the rulers, which by the way are in inches, that's my default measurement increment in Photoshop preferences, that this image at its native size, and that's what this ruler is showing us, is roughly about 15 inches in height and about 22 inches in width. So certainly a 16 by 20 is achievable here, no problem. And I could probably easily double that size and still have an acceptable print resolution. Now, as I go over here to the next image, I'm going to turn on those rulers for this one. That's, again, Command R for you Mac users, Control R for you Windows users. And here you can see, now we're down to about 13.5 by 20, still a respectable size. I'm going to keep working my way along, and I'm probably going to go over here to image E and stop there for a minute. That's one where we are about at 60% of the original pixels, and we're viewing 35% of the pixels in the image right now. And we can see that now we're looking at about a 9 by 13 image. Let me recenter that up real quickly. I'm going to keep working my way down. There's a 50% reduction. There's a 40% reduction. Look at that, about a 6 by 9 image. And I keep working my way down here. I'm going to get down to this 20% image. Wow, down here at 20%, I'm looking at roughly 3 inches by 4 inches at native size. We'll go all the way down to that last one, that 10% one. Bring on our rulers real quickly. Wow, 2 inches by maybe 2.5, or somewhere roughly in that neighborhood. I'm kind of spitballing the measurements off the rulers here on the sides, but I don't know about you guys, but I think this is going to make a killer wallet size print. Okay, I think real quickly we've driven to our point here, which is Photoshop's rulers are really a key indicator of how big this print is potentially going to print and still look good. Okay, if I took this last image here and said, hey, let's just see this at 100% view, not at our zoomed view, that's the size we could expect to get, about that 1 3/4 by 2.5, give or take, and have it still look good. Now we're looking at 100% of the pixels at that size. Don't forget that Command 1 shortcut or Control 1 shortcut, depending on whether you're a Mac or Windows user, to help you get dialed in to seeing it at the proper zoom ratio at the native pixel size that's in the image. If I come back over here to that image A and I say, show me a Command 1 view here, that 100% view here, wow, that is taking up a lot of room on the screen, and I can scroll around here and really inspect the image. I can also look at this image and go, wow, at 100%, that's pretty clean, pretty sharp. A little bit of noise in there. This was a lower light image taken early in the morning, which we can't discount, but we can clean that up with noise deduction software or noise reduction software, depending on how you want to say that. But you can see at that 100% view, this is pretty sharp. This is going to make a pretty good print as soon as I take that sensor spot off of there. All right, hopefully that helps you to get dialed into how to quickly determine print size. Remember, those subjective thoughts on print size get thrown in there as well, but this should get you in the rough ballpark pretty darn quickly. So there you have it, folks. Some real quick down and dirty ideas on how to determine potential maximum print size for an image. Don't get hung up on what the rulers say is the rule. You have some latitude in there. And again, it comes down to that personal subjectivity that we've talked about a couple times here in the video. But do remember that those rulers in Photoshop are really good indicators of where you can potentially go with printing an image. Now, over a period of time, one of the things that will become clearer and clearer to you is certain resolutions yield certain print sizes without any problems. So you may find yourself having that information from those rulers drop off in your mind as you progress forward with your editing skills. Nothing wrong with that. You're still making the same determination. You're just not using a tool to help you make that determination, which is image size. The number of pixels in that image have a direct impact on the potential print size you can get out of it. And this should bring one more thought into focus and crystallize it in your mind. While cropping can be a really great thing to help you get the image dialed in the way you want it to look from a composition perspective, it can also be a negative when you're thinking about print size. If you take a 34 megapixel image and you crop 50% of that away, you don't have a 34 megapixel image anymore. You have a 17 megapixel image. I wrestle with this with print clients all the time. They bring me files and say, I'd like this to be a 40 by 60. And I say, well, I'd like it to be a 40 by 62. But the reality is, if I print it for you that way, you're not going to be happy with the results. Remember that cropping has that impact. A lot of times, even though we advocate cropping in Lightroom and in Photoshop, it's better to get it right in the camera first if you can, because then you're taking maximum advantage of all those pixels that you paid for in that sensor. All right, that's a wrap for this video. Remember, as we always say, learning equals skills, practice equals mastery. We'll see you out there.